Okay, so this is part 6 of our Illustrator map series, and what we're going to be doing this time is going to be a little challenging. So you may have to go over this once or twice, but what we're going to be doing is adding a background to this map, adding a frame, and then putting everything else in that. Okay, so it sounds tougher than it actually is. But let's go ahead and take it step by step. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is to draw our background and get that moved to the right position. So for that, we're just going to go to our regular rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a nice big square or rectangle over pretty much everything. I'm going to make sure that it extends well past beyond our source map. So once I have that in place, I'm going to give it the style, and that's going to be my A1 land no lines. Okay, that's our standard background. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go arrange, send to back. Okay, do you see how that is bringing everything out kind of into contrast, proper contrast, right? So that's basically how we want our map to look. Now, because we have little elements kind of running off the side here and there, we need to get this cropped or clipped back into the proper size for our grid. Let's see. I'm going to turn off the map source. I'm going to turn back on the grid. Now, if you see, the map that we drew is bigger than our grid lines, right? But we want all of this stuff to be inside that grid to fit nicely in the grid without having to scale it. So how do we get that in there is we do that by working with a clipping mask, right? And so a clipping mask can be any, just about any type of object or shape. But for this, we're going to be using another rectangle, right? And it doesn't matter what it looks like. So I'm just going to draw a generic rectangle right here. And for the sake of making it easy to see, I'm going to give it the small landmark style. All right. So then I'm going to scale it to make sure that it fits that grid, right? So I'll pull that in here and up until I can probably go one further there and then up here, right? So that this is fitting pretty close to where the grid lines would indicate. If I want to see for sure, I can do a Command Y and go into keyline mode, and you can see that yes, in fact, this does adhere pretty tightly to the grid behind it. When that's the case, I can go back into my preview mode, and as long as this is in front, as long as this is in the forwardmost position, I can select all of these objects, right? Remember, the guide layer is locked, and so is the map source, so those won't be selected. And then if I right click, I can go down to make clipping mask. And what that's going to do is it's going to take everything selected and put it inside of the forwardmost object. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can see now that our map is cropped to the exact size of the template grid. And so that's pretty handy. So the last thing that we need to do for this map is to add our typography and some other elements to it. So we'll do that in the next installment. Thanks again. Welcome back. I think this is part 7 of our Illustrator Locator map tutorial series, and we're getting pretty close to being finished in here. And one of the last things we're going to work with is typography. So the great thing about working with the template is that there are examples for just about anything that you want to do down here. Let me close that. So all of these different elements are going to be things that we might need for our map. So you can just start grabbing things and kind of dragging them forward. If you do that, you'll see that when I do that, let me actually zoom in a little bit and I'll do that again. If I do that, that actually winds up being behind the map that we created, and that's because of the object order situation with Illustrator. The newer the object, the forward it's going to be in the object order. So if I just select our clipping mask, right click, and go arrange send to back, now any of those text elements that I bring up here should be fine. So I know I'm going to need a main city. That's always required. I might need a small landmark. I'll probably need some road names. I'll need, I don't think scale is every bit as important as it used to be, but I definitely need a north arrow to indicate my map orientation. I usually just put that in a corner somewhere. And then I'm going to need a source, and I'm going to need a credit. Okay. So this stuff is all kind of left over from when I was working at the news press. So I'll just copy those over here and move those into position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my source over here and line that up. And over here, I'm going to have my credit. And if that's a little tight, or too loose, actually, I can nudge those up maybe one click. My source, if you remember, is going to be Google Maps, right? And then we can make up some different publication. I can just actually pull out the publication in general and just say Michael Donlin. And when you do this on your maps, I want you to do that too, okay? So now we get into working with our main city. So we sort of have two we can choose from. Gateway would probably be fine. It's not an incorporated city, but it's well known. We could also use South Fort Myers, or we could use both of them. All right. And then for our small landmark, we can just say Jet Blue Park and have that over here serving as a landmark. And let's see. We know that this is Daniels Parkway. So D-A-N-I-L, Daniels Parkway, the abbreviation we use is PKWY, period. And then what I'm going to do is go to the corner here and rotate that until it matches the sort of contour of the road. I'm going to try to give it a little space. Most of the time I prefer type to be to the north of the road when it labels it. But it might be getting a little tight in there. I can adjust this so that it has a break in it. That might give us a little more space to play with. And the main thing, though, is we need to get this road named. But I've kind of lost track of that. So I can take a look by turning back on our map source layer and turning off these other ones. And if it's not there, and I have to go back and find it, I just have to go back and find it. So I'm actually going to do that right now. I'm going to go back to Google Maps, zoom in, and I'm going to see it's on West Links Terrace. Okay, so I'll go back to Illustrator, and I'm going to copy this road name with an Option drag and type in West Links TER, period. All right. And next, the last thing we have to do is change the type for our pointer box. So again, we'll turn off these layers to see what the map says. And it's Casa Lupita Cafe, so that's what we're going to have in there. And I just use my type tool to select that. And Casa Lupita Cafe. And that should do it. So this is about all you need to have for your map. You can see that there's not too much information where you're kind of overwhelmed, but there's enough information that if you know your way around Southwest Florida, you can probably get there by means of having a couple of landmarks and a couple of major road names. So that should do it. When we want to export it, that actually looks a little spacey. I'm going to nudge those up one more time. When we want to export it, that's the last section of the tutorial, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So thanks for watching. Hello again. This is section 8 of our Adobe Illustrator Locator Map tutorial series, and this is where we're going to go into or get into exporting your map. All right, so we've gone ahead and we've created your our map, and it's ready to go. It's looking exactly the way we want it to. If we turn on the column guides, we can see that it fits nicely into a one-column format. But when we export it, we want to make sure that all we're exporting is the map itself. So here's a little trick on how to do that. The first thing we want to do is select everything that's going to be in our map, right? And you can see that our selection is bound by these control points. So we know there's nothing way outside of here that's also been selected. Then we want to go to the Object menu and go all the way down toward the bottom where it says Artboards, and we want to fit the artboard to selected art. When we do that, you'll see what happens. Our artboard becomes just the size of the selected of the objects that we have selected. So once that's done, anytime we go to export, we're only going to get what's on the page. So we can go ahead and go to File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. And what we're going to do, it's a little different for our purposes in class. But here what we're going to do is we're going to change this to, let's say, 1200 pixels wide. All right. And we'll tab through that. And so now you can see that that's nice and big and sharp. And we have this set to a PNG 24, and that maintains a transparent background. And so we're just going to go ahead and hit save. Okay. And then that's going to give us our dialog box to save that. I'm going to go ahead and save it to my extremely messy desktop. And I'm going to call this Donlin Casa Lupita Cafe Map. And I can either hide or show my extensions. You can see that that's going to be a PNG. And then when I hit save, it'll go through that whole process and export the file. So that's really about it. Now, I know on the test, you're not really required to go through the export procedure, but it's a good thing to know. All right. And you might have to do that for, well, it's 10 o'clock. You might need to know that for visual storytelling. So once you've exported that, that would be the file that you would upload. So that's really about it. Feel free to hit me up with any questions, and we'll see you in the next series.